talking about people wanting to close down Main Street?
Yes.
Just summertime again.
Yeah. We should also, Dennis, I know I mentioned to you, I don't know if have you looked at the studies that were done that we had commissioned a few years ago?
I did not, Aaron.
When we studied parking and transit. There's some good information. I believe there should be some good information there. I know we had good conversation about why communities choose to close down Main Street and the outcomes and all that. It's a good thing to look at, where communities of a similar size, when they close down Main Street, many of them regret it. And so that's part of the reason why we've decided in the past to not close it down. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am fully in support in the time of COVID. It's the right thing to do for our community this summer and potentially next summer, depending on where we are COVID wise. But it's just good information to have as far as other communities that have gone down that road.
Well, we certainly read that. Thank you. But, now that we've done it and people have a feel of what it feels like, and the other people that were affected that don't live on Main Street or don't run businesses, now that we've actually had that experience, I'd really like to hear from them.
Absolutely. Well, and they were great, not complaining this summer. So,
yeah.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order since everybody's here. Roll call, please.
Ms. Sade.
Here.
Mr. Carlton.
Here.
Mr. Bergeron. Ms. Owens.
Here.
Mr. Kuhn.
Here.
Ms. Giello.
Here.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Agenda, Rick, any changes?
No, just the 2 items, and then if there's any other matters.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
I'm going to let Shannon kick off the first one. Everybody realizes the memo that she had in the packet was pretty self-explanatory, but this is a result of the nicotine tax collection that we've been doing countywide. Part of the IGA, if you recall, with the county was that we would put together a working group, and then there would be an advisory committee that would make recommendations to the elected bodies. So here we are making those recommendations to you, and I'll just let Shannon do kind of a brief rundown of those recommendations.
Thanks, Rick. So hopefully the memo was comprehensive enough. I tried to include just a reminder on how we got to where we are today, and included the ballot language and the IGA in there for your review and to refresh your memory on that. If you recall, we also had a working group that was put together last year prior to the ballot measure to talk about what programs were out there, where they thought gaps were, and what we were maybe missing, what needed to be funded with a nicotine tax in order to try to help folks quit or not, particularly kids, not start. So that was a little bit of a different group that met this year. Diane McBride from Frisco was on it, as well as Carrie McDowell from Dillon and myself, and then a lot of the providers and representative from the county. So that group, I think, did a really nice job, and we didn't include it in here because it's a fairly large document, but they put together a matrix of all of the evidence-based prevention cessation programs that they were recommending, and then as a group, we rated them and prioritized them, and then presented that to the managers on September 4th. And what came out of that is synopsized in that PowerPoint presentation that's at the end of this document. It gives you kind of a really brief overview of why we need to have regulations in place to try to prevent smoking and people from starting to use tobacco and nicotine products. It also gives you just a general list of the programs that were recommended and how they were prioritized, an estimation of where we think revenue will come in for 2020, which is fairly significant. And again, we hope that will go down over time as people stop using those products. And then there's a budget that includes, a recommended budget that includes both funding for 2020 and 2021 for those projects that have been recommended, as well as funding for Building Hope, the Care Clinic, and FERC included in that. And then a small amount, a $50,000 recommended amount that each town might want to spend on other programs. So from that, we have some questions for you, but before we get to the questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on the process or the programs. I have to say I haven't memorized them, but I do have the matrix up. So if you have a question about a specific program recommendation, I can give you a little bit of feedback on that.
All right, questions?
Really what we want to see is we want, obviously we're trying to address this now because there's some programs that are looking for some 2020 money. And it's in that column, you'll see it's a smaller amount. The funding for these will be based on the percentage of, so right now Breckenridge is collecting about 29% of the overall county funding. So we would pay 29% towards that program cost. For Silverthorne would be in at 30, et cetera. You can see on the one page there what the percentages are, which is a very, I think it's a fair and equitable way of funding these organizations, and certainly different than what we've seen in the past. So I kind of like it. Frisco has already gone to the council. They've given a thumbs up on the recommendations, and so has Silverthorne, although they want to hear from a few of the program providers. I guess they have time and they want to hear from them, but they're generally in support of all of this stuff, and I think Dillon's getting ready to go, and the county also is supportive of their share of the funding. So that's the plan. We would take the 2020 money if you approve this, and we would pay, you know, we'll end up having to do an appropriation, right? Because we're doing new spending authority, but we'll pay out that small amount, our share in 2020. In January, we would pay the 2021 funding, and the Plan B, which Shannon hadn't got to yet. That's the funding to the big three: FERC, Building Hope, and Care Clinic. We'll pay that in January, and that our payment on that is in lieu of any other grant money. So we pulled them out of our typical fall grant cycle because we're funding them through this money instead. That helps us free up other money. We don't have to transfer in out of the general fund into that big grant. And then you're going to probably, you know, assuming that next year is similar in collection to this year, you'll be setting on about $500,000, give or take, that's left over by the end of this. And that's, I would suggest to you that that's a pot of money you should leave there if you have little emergencies or asks or needs that come on during the year in 21. I think you have some flexibility in where you spend it based on the language, as long as it's towards organizations, people helping, you know, really, I mean, even so much as like helping out a child care center if you have to, I think, because, you know, that goes to the wellness and care of a child. And so that's part of the language in here. But, you know, the other thing is we'll have extra money to go to child care because our marijuana money, we won't be using it to fund detox. We'll be funding detox out of this nicotine money. So that'll free up a little more money for child care in that regard.
Can I just comment on that as well? So there's one of the other things that's included in this is a media campaign. And we provide about $20,000 to $30,000 a year for the Healthy Futures Initiative media campaign. And we thought there would be synergy between a nicotine program, a nicotine media campaign, and a marijuana media campaign. So we've rolled those two things together. So that's one of the projects that's recommended to be funded through the nicotine money. So then we don't need to fund the marijuana, using marijuana funds. So instead of having two media programs, we'll have one, it'll be funded out of nicotine. So that would free up some of the money in the marijuana. And also for Building Hope, the $100,000 that you gave to Building Hope in 2020 came out of marijuana money as well. So to Rick's point, funding these programs through nicotine will free up that marijuana money if you choose to use it for childcare or whatever.
This isn't really a question, but I was blown away by the fact that as a percentage of students who use vaping products, it's estimated that 50%, we are 50% higher in Summit County. That astounded me. Maybe I'm just naive, but that was a wild moment for me.
Dennis, and I think we're hoping that some of this funding will change that number. It was just, you know, when the vaping products came on the market, it was such a fad at the high school and middle school that we've been playing catch up ever since. I don't know that anybody really saw it come on as the way it did. So this is great to have funding to really attack it. I mean, it's not that people have been doing nothing, but now we have some real funding to get after it and change those numbers.
Agreed.
So do you have any questions about what we're asking you to fund in 2020 and 2021?
I have a question about state funding. Have we heard anything? Because I know, and I know on the state level, because of COVID, funding might be lighter this year. Have we heard any kind of stats that way? Because I know, you know, for instance, with the Care Clinic, there's state grants for cessation and things like that. I just want to know, you know, how our piece fits with the other pieces. Do we have a feeling at all about state funding right now?
So they, as part of that exercise, the providers were asked to give us some information whether they thought alternate funding sources were going to be available. So in the matrix that they created, some of them show that they are getting funding from other sources that's already committed to and it's coming in. And so the amount we've been asked to provide takes that into consideration. We did think there might have been some small funding options that had not been applied for yet that weren't guaranteed. And I think between the conversation with the providers and the conversation that the managers had, they decided not to hold back funding for those potential small opportunities because they really aren't likely to come to fruition. But the providers are they know, I think, pretty well where their funding is coming from and what's been reduced. So they felt confident with the numbers they put forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so everybody's fine with this path for this nicotine money? All right.
That was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? I don't have a question, but Rick and I talked about it briefly yesterday, and I just know that, you know, in the past when we've been reading, and I think vaping is a little bit different as far as how hip it is in the sports world at high school. I think that was a little bit of a surprise to all of us. But, you know, lots of studies in the past have shown how sports keep kids out of tobacco use. And so I would really, in the future, Shannon, love it if that group looked at, should we be funding some sports teams? Are there some after school programs, like not nicotine based and not like, you know, preaching the don't do drugs, but like giving kids a reason not to do drugs without them even realizing it. And tobacco, I guess, being that specific one that we're talking. I think that this funding and seeing that we're going to have some extra money, and I know there's never really extra money, we're going to find a million great places to put it, but I think that sports teams would be a really terrific beneficiary of some of this money, but obviously we would have to look into it. So maybe Shannon, you could broach that topic with the group.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. I think they really focused on, evidence-based programs that they could kind of hang their hat on. But I can certainly bring it up with them. The other thing that I would mention to you all, and Dick, I think, can comment on this. Jeffrey's not here to comment, but we have traditionally in our grant process for the town not funded athletic programs. So we had put a certain amount of money with an organization, I think it was out of Frisco, and it was small, it was like $7,500 or $10,000, and then that organization distributed that money to athletic organizations. I can't remember, Dick, it was last year, the year before, that organization went away, we took the money back in, and so that is a part of the grant process right now, but it is a really small amount of money. So certainly there's opportunities there.
Yeah, I was going to comment that, with the nicotine money replacing the big three, it did leave some money in the budget. Jeffrey and I have met and kind of done a first, taking a first look, a first draft at the grants, and we're going to revisit it one more time and then bring it back to you guys with recommendations. But it did allow us to support some of the sports. Some of the sports are in there. And, we do a fair amount with in-kind, with fields and ice time and all of those things as well. Scott does all the in-kind through the rec department. So Scott and his team. But your point is good, and I'm in full agreement. We did a big push with money into our rec facilities in support of some sports, and when we come out of this thing and in future years, that's something that I'd be supportive of revisiting. Some of the issues with sports is just lack of fields and such. So, but I'm in total agreement with you. And we did do a little more this year, Jeffrey and I did. So
there has to be a message with
amount. Yeah.
There has to be a message. It can't just be giving money to sports. There has to be a message that goes with that. So if it is, something on the boards at the hockey rink about vaping, I think that's the important piece. Just to, the problem is a lot of the kids that are in sports are the ones that are vaping. And we know that, Dick, you have told us that that's the case. So how does that message get out to those sports teams, number one? And number two, is the middle school and high school taking appropriate actions when kids are caught? I know they have with alcohol, but the vaping thing has become such a big deal. Has the county and the towns pushed the message that, hey, listen, this is a big deal for our community. You remember the pushback we got from the high school when we started talking about this stuff. We definitely need them to be a partner in this, that this becomes the serious piece. We're not just giving money for kids to go out and play sports out of this money. This money has to be related to the nicotine problem that we're having at the school. So.
Yeah, great point, Eric. Because the locker rooms of sports are often some of the worst places for these kids. So, great point is to tie it to a message if we're going to give money to it. So.
Anybody else?
One question, Shannon, you had mentioned part of these funds were going towards marketing efforts. Who's spearheading that? Is that Summit County Public Health?
So it depends on the effort. So the one project that I had mentioned, that is run out of Summit County Youth and Family. They've done the HFI mass media campaign for marijuana for now around 5 years. So this is I can't remember, this is the 4th or the 5th year, and we're doing a survey to see now if any of that marketing has actually had an impact.
And HFI is Healthy Futures, right?
Yeah, sorry. So in the prevention initiatives, there's an anti-vape / marijuana mass media campaign that would be run through Youth and Family. The anti-vape bus ads and the I-70 mountain corridor and local media, let me just look and I'll tell you who's handling those. So the I-70 Mountain Corridor media would be Summit County Public Health, and the anti-vape bus ads would also be Summit County Public Health, as well as the local media content. So those are all run out of the county.
Shannon,
And for the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
to Eric and Dick's point, so how do we know that the school is on board? How do we know that schools are on board with this program? We're talking that this is also sports related. Is there, I mean, I'm going back to when my kids were in high school. Is there monitoring in the locker rooms? Is there, how does this message actually get to the kids in school? I imagine there aren't, in this day and age in COVID, there's no assemblies.
So the school was part of the process. So they're definitely on board in that way. None of what we talked about had an enforcement aspect to it. So like you said, monitoring locker rooms or like Eric said, how they actually address kids when they're caught. It had a lot more to do with prevention. And one of the pieces that the school had asked for was funding for a school nurse. They've really had problems staffing those positions and making sure that they have staff in all of the schools at least part of the time. So that is one of the things the school specifically is doing. And then some of the funding is for the care clinic, and they run the school-based health programs or health centers. So there's youth cessation. Like that was one of the things we actually heard from the kids at the high school is that, you know, it's fine to add a tax onto the products to try to get kids, you know, not to be able to purchase them because they don't have enough money. But there are kids who want to quit and don't have just don't know how. And so some of these programs are specifically geared towards helping youth quit smoking as well, or quit using vaping products as well. So from that perspective, the school is fully engaged in this process. I did make a note to talk about the enforcement side of things. I don't know where they stand on that.
Thank you.
Dennis, I'm with you. I don't want this to get muddled. You know, the problem is we're going to end up spending money on things that don't necessarily have a direct relationship to this. And I think it can't just be high school based. It's got to be things like Team Summit, Team Breck. We need to do stuff at the skate park, things that are in our control also. And you know, as much as I agree that we need some stuff on I-70, I had an issue. I was probably the only one at the outset with getting adults off this stuff. Honestly, for me, this is about the kids in the middle school and the high school. That's where we should be really trying to pump as much of this money as a campaign as we can. And, you know, Amy and I got we had a thing because well, listen, if an adult wants to smoke cigarettes, I could care less. However, the way that the companies that make these vaping products market them to kids is completely unfair. And they're being, you know, they're being suckered into this so that down the line they become smokers. And somehow we need to intervene in that. And there's a lot of money to do that now. I want to make sure that we're just not throwing money at programs without, you know, knowing that this is going to actually have some kind of value to us. So it, you know, I feel like, you know, I think this is a great start. I want to make sure that what we're doing has some benefit to the kids in this community, because that was the whole impetus for this. That's what started this whole thing. You know, nobody came and said there are too many adults smoking cigarettes in the county. That's not what this was about. This was about a group of high school kids that went to the councils and started this thing.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, is that we need to make sure that we're doing things that work, you know, not just things that are visible to people. Like, and I get it, like it's taxpayers' money. And if you see something, you know, really visible, like maybe on a bus, I get that that's taxpayers can say, oh, well, that's where the money's going and whatever, but I don't know what kind of effect that has on high schoolers, and I'm not the person to make this decision, but I would love to know that we're doing things that will actually move the needle, that will actually help with this money.
Yeah.
So
Great.
I'm sorry, Dick, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, great points. And Eric, I think we can affect it, and I will do my part. I think Jeffrey and I'll bring it up in the grants prior to us bringing our recommendations to you. But, I think there should be a message about the health of our young athletes and how important that is to the town of Breck when we're funding these programs like Team Breck and, and it's soccer and hockey and all the club stuff that the youth, the younger kids end up playing. And I also think, many of us are on committees at the schools and we can make it a higher topic there. We've got new administration, at the high school anyway, and reasonably new at the middle school. So, I think we might see a little different reception than your, because I shared your frustrations of the past. And so, and I think COVID's an important message. It's a respiratory virus, and that's a strong message to these kids. They're seeing what that's doing, and I think that's another angle that we could take. So, I think, I appreciate you bringing it up. I think there's a lot that we can do, but just we need to keep it forefront of mind and really push it as we support these programs. Make it part of the deal.
Excellent.
The only thing I was going to add is most of the prevention initiatives are focused on youth. There's a couple of adult education pieces in there, but the majority of them are focused on youth. The cessation has some youth components, but it definitely has a stronger focus on the adult population, I think mostly because that's who they're probably seeing more, especially in the care clinic, not in the school-based health clinics, but in the care clinic. And all of these programs are evidence-based. So I know it seems odd to me how much impact a bus ad might have or a billboard might have, but they say that those mass media campaigns are one of the best ways to get messages to people, and they do have a higher impact than some other programs in impacting behavior, which again, I find odd, but that's what the evidence shows. I have made a bunch of notes based on what you guys had to say, and I do think we can start having the conversation about how funds are spent as we move forward, so that when we sit down again next year, we kind of maybe broaden the scope of what the group is looking at.
Excellent. I mean, I'd even be great with getting somebody from staff to stand out by the skate park and using this money to do that, because that some of those older guys out there that smoke or vape out at the skate park, they're influencing those kids that are out there. And we have all heard that. So I think steps like that are important for us to take also. Or we just send Rick out there.
Yeah. Or Jeffrey, and it could be a whole scared straight scenario.
This is what you'll end up like?
Yeah. Remember the fried egg?
Brain on drugs.
Brain on drugs, right?
All right. Anything else?
Appreciate it.
Very good. Let's go to the buy down program.
Nicole, Lori are both on here. So. Go ahead, Nicole.
You're on mute.
Nobody can hear you.
You're either muted or there's something wrong with your computer.
It doesn't say muted.
No. Do you know sign language? No, well, neither do I, so it doesn't matter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Nicole, why don't you see if you could go off and then try to come back on. But, Nicole's memo was in the packet, and this basically is sort of our proposal for a plan to do the sort of partnership with local businesses to rent out these buy down units through a master lease program. And we kind of just wanted to get your reaction to the plan that Nicole described in her memo. And if you guys can hear her now, I'll let her actually respond or take comments.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, guys. So I think Lori probably just did a quick brief intro, but last council meeting, we had a quick discussion and had your feedback about the town buy down kind of master leasing program for local businesses. And in your memo, we outlined the details of that program, you know, giving priority to businesses located in Breckenridge, but Summit County businesses will be able to apply, and we will kind of apply this preference in the lottery process, kind of depending on how many applications we have. We, you know, kind of provided some of the other requirements that we discussed, the 6-month lease agreement, and we talked about maybe doing a potential month-to-month extension on a case-by-case basis. You know, talking about the HOA and property rules, it's going to be you know, really important to make sure that it's clear that they need to abide by those rules, the employer and the occupant. You know, we provided some occupancy limits that were in the table. This was kind of based on square footage and number of bedrooms. I think the most careful one we were looking at is Colorado Now, because it's such a small unit, but we understand it's 2 bedrooms. So be happy to get your guys' feedback on that one. We also included a rent to purchase option. So we'll have a purchase agreement option within the master lease that we kind of did the same thing for CMC when we master leased with them at CMC or at Denison Commons. So they had the option to buy after a certain amount of time. So, and we're proposing that 75% of the rent paid to the town would be used towards the purchase price of the property if they did choose to do that option. And the reason for that is the remaining 25% will go towards hard costs that the town will incur. Things we'll never see back, like HOA dues, utilities, insurance, things like that, management fees. So that's kind of why we're thinking most of the payments would go to the purchase price, but we would keep some to cover the costs that we incurred during the time we master leased the unit. In addition, we put a schedule in the memo, and this is you know, based on us starting and releasing the program for applying on October 5th. And then we'd have a 2-week application period until October 16th. And on October 17th, we would hold a live Zoom kind of lottery, and then people could watch. And we're ironing out the process, but similar to Blue 52, they had a bunch of little ping pong balls with numbers on it. So each application signed a number, and you just pull them out, and it would be a list of kind of in order who gets selected, and the first person would get the first option, and we'd go down the line. So I think we're going to use a similar process to that, and then a goal of getting the leases signed on November 1st. And I didn't include this, but we are planning on doing some outreach. We are going to put some advertisement in the Summit Daily. We're going to email all of the Bolt holders that we have emails for, which are most of them. I think that's really the target group that we're trying to get to apply for this program. And we're going to put it on our social media outlets, and I'll work with Haley on getting some advertisement out on there for the application process. And then we also provided a table of all the units. And I just wanted to preface this with, if we receive a serious purchase contract or purchase offer by on or before kind of the lottery date, we will be considering that offer because the ultimate goal is to sell these units. But we also definitely want to have them occupied as the winter season approaches. So this list could change if something changes in the next few weeks. But we have a proposed rental rate that we shared the memo in table 1. And we really base this off of what are our costs for these units and what will it cost to maintain it once the tenant leaves and there's a turnover period. So I won't go into all the details, but we included the monthly HOA and the management fee. The utilities per unit, they definitely range based on the property. The unit maintenance, we've kind of assumed based on square footage. When you go in, you're gonna have to redo the carpet, the paint, all that stuff that you usually have to do when tenants leave or when occupants leave and things like that. And then our insurance, which is pretty minimal. And our rental rates as proposed range from 40% to 60% AMI. And that's essentially the memo. And I'm looking forward to your guys' feedback. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Nicole, did you mention that if somebody was interested, a business was interested in more than one unit?
Oh, yes. So we would consider if a business was interested in renting more than one unit, allowing them to do that. Depending on how many applications we get, we will give everyone a chance to select a unit who's in the lottery in the town of Breck bucket. And if there's someone in that kind of bucket, that the priority bucket that wants to rent more than one unit, we'll allow them to do that. But we're kind of going to have to see how many applications and what types of businesses apply, but we would allow a business to rent more than one unit if it was available.
Okay, questions? Kelly.
I have a couple. One is this application like going to be pretty simple so that even very small businesses have a reasonable opportunity to apply for this?
Definitely. I've started kind of a draft application process. It's kind of similar to when you request a resale calculation form through the Housing Authority, or if you're requesting like a subordination from the town. It's a really simple online form that you'll just enter in, your business information, the units you're interested in, and if you're interested in renting multiple units, so that we can understand when we were doing the lottery, kind of where the interest is, and if there's any applicants that I would like to rent more than one unit. So it'll be very, very simple online.
And then my other question, I know that this is a short-term rental, so we might not get applicants with families, but in the table it has an adult occupancy limit, and I was wondering if that really just means human, or if we're not allowing people with kids, or what?
So we put adult occupancy limit because when it comes to infants, usually there's a little more flexibility around occupancy. Our biggest concern is that if someone's trying to stick 6 adults into like the Gold Camp unit, which would be way too many, and they could probably never meet the parking requirements of the HOA. So really the limits are for adults. And I think if there was a family that had really young children or infants, we would probably look at that occupancy limit a little differently. So that's—
you have something that says like adult occupancy limit, or it would have to be like all related people.
Yeah.
So that we don't get like 2 single moms with 2 kids each or something, which I mean, of course we want to help that situation, but it's probably too much for any of these units.
Yeah, we can work on crafting a little more finessed occupancy limit in the master lease. For sure.
Just before we get those applications, just so that we don't get anything that we didn't really intend to have.
That's a great point. I can definitely work on that.
This looks great though. I can't believe that we're going to be able to offer some 40 to 60% AMI rentals. It's really a terrific step for us.
Yeah, we're excited. It's fun.
Thanks for figuring it out.
I have a couple. First, are we going to be doing the AMI testing and are we going to be checking on occupancy and that sort of thing?
We're not going to AMI test these units. Since it's a master lease, it's going to be, we're going to master lease with the employer, and they're going to select the occupant, their employee. So we have hired Alpine Management, or we're in the process of hiring them to manage these units. So they're going to take in the applications and get all the information signed. So we still are going to know who's in the units and ensure that they're employees of the business. And that's going to be through some type of form that they say, yep, the occupant might change, and they would have to work with Alpine Edge to make sure that they're up to date. So that's in that HOA management fee. The management piece is they're going to manage that process. But we aren't doing income testing for these units for this program.
Okay. And then as the proposed rental rate or the rental rate, will that be part of the agreement? I could see people maybe wanting to up the rent a little bit for the whole rent to own option, which I think it's great that we are providing a rent to own option, but we'll lock in that they have to charge this rent, right?
Like charge it to the tenant?
To the tenant, yeah. That they can't. I don't know. I guess it's a question. Sorry, that wasn't really posed as a question, but are we?
Yeah, that's a good point. That'd be unethical if somebody tried to make money off of the program. But we can put that we'll put that in the master lease agreement, because if we found out somebody was doing that, I'd be really upset.
Yeah, that's definitely will be protected in the master lease.
As long as an employer could just pay the rent and not charge their employees also, though.
Well, we think that's what we prefer. We prefer that the employer is responsible for the payment, and the employer then is required to collect the rent from the tenant.
I think that's the way to do it. Then the employer can decide whether they want to eat a couple $100 a month rent in order to have an employee that they want to retain.
Yeah, as long as they can't charge more.
That's
my concern, because it could be pretty attractive as an investment for the future, you know, and because these are well below market rates for rents, I think. As long as there's some protection there.
I mean, it's only 6 months too, so.
Yeah, well, and so I have one more question that leads to that. The master lease will include a provision to prohibit frequent turnover of tenants. Staff recommends either 30 or 60 days. I wasn't really clear on that. What does that mean, the 30 or 60 days?
When we master lease to an employer, for example, in like Kennington, they can master lease to employers for long-term leases. So there's, the short-term definition is less than 30 days, and we can kind of change that as we create covenants. But our goal is that there wouldn't be frequent turnover. So they can kind of select who's in these units, and they might not choose that they stay in there for the full 6 months. They might, but they might not. For example, if they have like a very short seasonal employee, but they are having a really hard time recruiting, they might only need 60 days or 90 days. But we don't want to have a lease that short. So it would be that there would be some provision in the master lease that occupant turnover cannot occur for more than 30 or 60 days, some type of threshold, so that they're not turning over tenants occupants every 2 weeks, which would cause a lot of kind of stressfulness, I think. So that's kind of the goal through that provision.
The thing to think about, though, is if you have an employee that leaves to go to another job, you need to get them out of there. So, somewhere in that language, it has to say something to the effect that if the employee, ceases to work for the master leaseor, then, I don't know, because there's a lot of turnover in this town, and we can't have, Dick can't be housing people that don't work for him anymore. That's unfair to the business.
Totally. And we'll definitely have that in there. This is really about, not being able to just kick someone out for no reason or, really quickly, but that'll be kind of that if the employee's terminated or unemployed, they have to be out in 3 days is what we're kind of proposing. Is they can't just kind of squat in the unit after they get terminated or whatever happens. So we do have this in a lot of our leases, even town leases. So we're going to kind of put together a combo lease agreement with some information from kind of our old master lease and some other master leases that have been done in the community, and kind of build something based on that.
Great. Aaron, did you have anything else?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis.
Nicole, I do agree with Eric, is the master lease should have control over their employees. So that is a really good point. I love the program. I love what you're doing. The rents are amazing. And a couple small things. I didn't see anything in there about pets. I don't think these units should have pets at all. Being a landlord for 30 years, that gets too hard to control. And I don't know that we can count on the people that have the master lease to monitor that unless we put it in the lease.
Yes, we'll definitely put that in the lease. And a lot of these condos actually don't allow tenants to have pets. A lot of them, only the owners can have pets. So we'll definitely put a double layer of protection. The only thing that may come up is ADA accommodations or disability accommodations. If the pet is some type of service animal, that's when we'll have to permit something like that. But other than that, we will definitely have a no pet provision in the master lease, and then it'll probably be extra cushioned by the HOA rules.
Well, we also don't, we like to say no smoking in our units.
Yep.
We do that on all our town units because it's just, you know, it's so hard to get in there afterwards. And,
No vaping.
Good idea.
No kids vaping.
No kids vaping.
Parents are fine.
We could advertise in the units.
So I have any other questions or comments, Game? Yeah, Dick.
Nicole, you mentioned, I think, in the housing meeting that there's a couple that may not be furnished or some partially furnished. You might just throw another column in there and identify partially furnished, fully furnished, not furnished, just so that the landlords know what. And now Colorado at 3 people, I think, is fine. I lived in those things with 5 when I got to town, so it was a little crowded, but I think 3 will be fine.
Dick, do you know I was one of the first tenants in now Colorado ever? They put them up that summer, and we moved in the fall.
I bet they were nice back then too.
You could see
bad, man. Bad.
So I just wanted to bring up the lottery system, and when we get, if we don't get enough Breck business buy-in to this thing, I think we should do, if we do open it up to Summit County businesses, we should do some kind of geographical location thing. Because a business at Farmer's Corner should be more eligible than a business in Silverthorne.
I agree.
Just because of this transit piece, or a business, right outside the town limits should be, so somehow if we do get to that point, and I hope it's just Breck businesses and then we're done anyway.
Yeah, I got a feeling we'll have some businesses that want more than 1 unit.
Which is great. If Breck businesses take all these things, I think that'd be great.
We've got at least 2 or 3 of the units being shown a couple of times by realtors in the next week or so. As showings are set up. So, I don't know if anything's going to happen. I think one of the Gold Camp units is being shown, and Valdecera maybe, is that right, Lori? I think so.
I think there's a good chance we may see a sales contract on either one of the Now Colorado units or the Valdecera unit. And then maybe we'll see an offer on the Gold Camp unit. So, our 8 units could go down to 5 or 6, somewhere in there.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, anything else? Everybody good with this? All right.
There will be, we do a background check, but generally what we're looking for in a background check is we're looking at recent criminal activity because we're looking for patterns or things that are more recent, like anything, because that's going to be your best indicator of future behavior, right? Is what have they been engaging in recently? So we know there may be instances where people have things that it's been a while on a criminal history report or something like that, but generally we're just looking for recent poor behavior. So on those types of things to try to get an idea of who's in our units, because we want to respect the neighbors.
Yeah.
Communities also, and that's a big deal for us. So, there's going to be a 2-strike rule. If you can't follow the rules of the HOA and you keep violating the rules, we're going to ask the employer to remove the tenant because they're creating disruption and not following the rules. So,
Dennis, did you have something to add?
One other question on the lottery, Nicole. So everybody gets a shot at 1 unit. If we have units left over after that, then an employer could get a shot at a 2nd unit. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how we're planning on doing it now. I think everyone that applies should get, at least in the town limits, should get a chance to get a unit if they want one. And then we can offer a backup if there are remaining units.
All right. Other questions, comments? Okay, great job.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, what else you got, Rick?
Yeah, that's really all that we wanted to get done today. Let's see if you have anything else. I'm going to set up a couple of, we're breaking the budget stuff in. So we're going to be spending the 13th going through budget, and we're also going to be doing kind of wrapping up any of the final layers of the budget at the special meeting on the 20th of October. Part of what I want to do, I think, is to kind of lay the foundation, and we've done this in years past, is we want to hear from a couple of our partner groups, and I would like to limit them to about a 15 to 20 minute presentation to just give a quick overview of what they're looking for as they've kind of, speaking of, BTO and BCA primarily, we'll talk about whether we need BHA. Those are the three that typically, I think, are partner organizations that have drastically, in some cases, kind of reduced their funding ask, but that comes at a price, right? It comes at a price of, the programs and different things like that. And Kelly and Dick have been really getting down into the weeds with BCA and understanding what their revised, they actually have kind of if I remember correctly, kind of a 3-tier approach to the budget of what it could, what they could do based on, the level of funding that they get from the town. And so I think on the 13th, I want to allow them a little time to explain that in front of you before we jump into all the budget stuff. And I'll also be talking to BHA and BTO on a similar fashion on that. And then we'll kind of just start diving into and getting you a feel for where we're at budget-wise and walk you through the process. I haven't decided yet how we're going to kind of separate the 2 different days on this, but I'm trying not to have too many hours on one day. So,
hey, Rick, do the partner organizations know that if things really take a turn for the worse this winter, that money is not a guarantee?
Well, I can't say that I've said that exactly, but I think maybe that goes without saying, right? It's nothing's a guarantee for any of us. And if things take a big turn for the worse, then we're all going back to the table just like we did in 2020, and we're looking at where we're going to cut. Unfortunately, because most of those cuts now are going to start impacting personnel because we've already trimmed everything up so much, right?
Oh, yeah, except, there's a chance that some of these organizations get zero money from us. That's just going to have to be the reality depending on where we are. Everybody that gets money from the town of Breck needs to understand this going into the budget cycle, that depending on what happens this winter, the amount of funds they receive from us could be zero. I don't think there's any way around that. We can't get rid of people that plow the streets so that we can have music. And I don't think there's any other way to put it. So we need to make that known, that there are priorities for this community that some people, may not like, but they need to hear it, I think, from us.
Well, I think there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made in this day and age, and certainly none of us know what's around the corner, and we don't like the trending that we're seeing, and there's a lot of unknowns. So, yeah, I think those are things that I can articulate, and I think you as a council can also. You just did.
Well, yeah, I am worried that there is a false sense of the light at the end of the tunnel right now in this community. And I think we're seeing that, the summer was good. I think a lot of people breathe a sigh of relief after the summer, but we are far from out of the woods on this thing yet. And somehow we need to get that message out to everybody, not just the partner organizations, but the people that live in the community. They're, you know, like Dennis said about the masks, people are letting their guard down right now, and we're seeing a spike already. And some of this stuff we have no control over. And you can argue that, hey, look, nobody in this community is dying, so what's the big deal? The state is still going to play a role in telling us whether we can be open or not. So no matter what we do, we need to be prepared, and the people in the community need to understand that vigilance on this is still super important. And we can't, you know, we can't go back to where we were in March, where we're shutting stuff down.
And Eric, we have mayors and managers on Thursday.
Yes.
And I feel that we have to continue to drive that message home countywide and say, now we have to, we have to look at, toughening up a little bit, I think, and taking a harder stance. And I tell you, this is why I feel very strongly about Halloween. I think that we should be taking a strong stance on this. And I don't think anybody's going to suggest that we go in and create as a town manager order that prohibits it. That'd be way to one extreme far, but I think we should be publicly discouraging it. We should discourage people from handing out candy and from discouraging parents from taking their kids out and doing it unless it's one of these other recommended type activities. And I don't know, I think the state's going to come out with something they said on October 1st, and that's probably what the county's waiting on. But there are a lot of different counties in the state in a different position than we are right now. If you look at the current map, I mean, we're one of the worst counties again. And so, maybe we shouldn't be following the same guidelines as Jefferson County right now because we're not in the same place.
So Rick, I was wondering if, there's just some interesting things going on about, I really think that we need to get the message back out that you need to keep your social circle very, very small. And I think it's interesting because we've allowed soccer programs and things to go on all summer long, which of course we do, it's a balance. I understand a mental health balance, a healthy body balance. But the thing that people don't seem to understand is how many people it affects when you or someone gets COVID. I mean, when a kid in a cohort gets COVID, it's all the teachers, it's specials teachers, it's the kids, and then that affects all those parents and they can't go to work. And I feel like, just like we've all been saying about being lax, I feel like now that, kind of all of us have known people who have had COVID over the summer, you really have to start paying attention to how many people it affects when you're having big group gatherings. And I've been seeing them in the Wellington neighborhood. I know they're outside, but people are not 6 feet apart and they're not wearing masks. And it makes me feel like we really just need to push the message of, think about your neighbors, think about the businesses in Breckenridge, think about the businesses in Summit County and what it does when just one person gets COVID. Maybe that, hopefully they don't get sick enough to even go to the hospital, but it affects so many families financially and mentally and in so many ways.
Well, and Kelly, it also will affect, just from a town standpoint, it will affect the amount of money that we take in as a community when we get pushed back to level 3 and we're at 25% occupancy for restaurants and retail.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden we have a bunch of guests coming to town and nowhere for them to go. If lodging gets pushed back, if meeting space gets pushed back, that's a huge impact. And all it takes is a couple offices or some people they don't even necessarily have to be related to school or anything like that.
Sure.
The county sees those numbers and that dial gets pushed back. That is a huge effect that'll be an effect on things like BCA and BTO and the amount of money that we can push towards those organizations. So, this is such a broad issue right now with this spike that we're seeing.
And that came up yesterday in the public health call that Shannon was on. She asked a question, are we looking at going back to level 3? And there's conversation, but we have to stay for a period of time in this poor area that we're in. And so hopefully we can turn this around so that we're not doing that. Did I say that correctly, Shannon?
I'm in
Yeah, we have to be at the current core metric for 2 weeks. And then the state will want to talk to public health about what our situation is and what that looks like. Oddly or not, I guess it's the fact that there are outbreaks in specific businesses or areas is better than if it's a broad countywide spread where they don't have a, kind of a single point of containment. So, but it could definitely go there if we don't get a handle on it.
I'm in full support of keeping a stronger message out there. And as far as Halloween goes, Rick, to your point, I was asking the BTO meeting the other day, are we making Halloween illegal? And I said, no, we're not making Halloween illegal at all. We're not throwing kids in the hoosegow for going out with a mask on, but
we could.
We do want that message to be that we're strongly discouraging it for the reason of the spike. And I think everybody gets that, but unless the message actually comes from the town, people aren't quite sure what the message is. So
whatever. No, they're waiting. I mean, Kelly's talking to people in the neighborhood every day, and they're waiting to hear what, the town's stance is going to be. So
what does that look like? I mean, is it the county that says, that puts an end to trick-or-treating this year, or do we just say it's strongly discouraged knowing that people will do it? What do we, is that our option?
You didn't wait for the county when you made some strong leadership decisions this summer and decided to be the first to create, a mandatory mask zone and do some different things, and then
right.
The county followed suit. So you can wait for the county, because the county's waiting to see what state public health is going to release. And they expect that to come out. And then the county, my guess, if you were to ask me, is it's going to be similar to CDC. They're not recommending it, or they suggest that if you're going to do it, you follow these precautionary measures in order to make it safer experience for everybody.
But I guess my question is, what are our options here? Because I guess I've never been part of saying no to trick-or-treating. Is it, and making masks mandatory on Main Street was so cut and dry. It was so, but, in thinking this through, are we saying that you can't hand out candy at your house? Are we saying, what are, I guess I don't understand what our options are.
So the one extreme option would be that there would be, as the town manager, with your authority, I could issue an order prohibiting trick-or-treating. That would be, yes, basically making it illegal, right? Depends on what the penalty is. But saying there will not be trick-or-treating in the town of Breckenridge this year. So that would be the one extreme. The other option is that we put out, which Haley is already thinking about and looking at, that we highly discourage traditional trick-or-treating as a way. And we discourage, the neighborhoods from doing the large gatherings and the kids going out. And here is what we would recommend you do for a more safer experience for your children. And there are some of those that were listed by the CDC. And that is where I think the message where we should lean as a town is to say, regardless of what the county does, which I probably will be similar, but it may be a little softer. I think our message is that we would highly discourage traditional trick-or-treating, and we discourage, neighborhoods from participating in those organized types of events. So.
Well,
some other guidance in those things, though, that was interesting, like the one-way street and the bags of candy on the lawn and some things like that. I mean, really, if we want to get ahead of it and we want to, push a compromise situation like that so we can, you know, this is how you can do it as a neighborhood in Wellington. You know, every street is one-way street, one-way alley, one-way street, one-way alley. You know, you can bag your candy and put it, you can use the town poop bags. They're colorful. You know.
My concern with that is that it's going, I mean, I don't know what the number is. Rick probably knows. 1,000 kids who come here, it feels like, which is wonderful. And obviously we love it. I mean, I feel like part of the reason I moved to the Wellington neighborhood is because of Halloween. But very unfortunately, I don't know how we could possibly help the kids and families, you know, stay on the track and don't stop at your friend's house just because you know the person in this house and you haven't talked to them all summer long, you know. I think I just do not know how this could be managed in a way that it could truly follow the guidelines. It's just too many people in one place. It's too many people who are, you know, encouraged to stop and chat. And I really don't see it working out as a physically distanced holiday celebration.
Kelly, is the HOA talking about this yet?
They're not. I mean, my understanding is they're really, I mean, I think just since the council has been talking about it, like the last 3 meetings, I think that they're kind of waiting to see what we say. But I can definitely reach out to Ian and some of those other folks and see what, you know, what their preference is or maybe what they've discussed behind the scenes.
It'd be nice to get some buy-in / just information from them, what they would like to see done.
Sure.
You know, if the HOA says, look, we don't want this to happen in any form.
Right.
That's
it's easier.
Right. Yeah. So if you
okay,
could,
I'll reach out to them today.
Okay.
Well, and the thing about Halloween is that it's a bit of a phenomenon. If we say that it's strongly discouraged, and yet, you know, we've already seen in the Wellington, like what Kelly alluded to, that there have been parties because they're somewhat legal, you know. If you have a bunch of kids walking around going from house to house, I mean, you still have to answer the door. You're still like, even though, and then you say, what, I'm not participating because this is the guidance. And then they go to another, you know, there's still it's just a phenomenon. So I think that we need to either say it's not happening or it's happening this way, or like, I totally agree with Rick. We need to take the lead, and with Kelly that this is it could be a potentially dangerous scenario. I just think that somewhat saying, here's the guidance, we believe in the CDC, it'll still happen. Like there'll still be groups of kids knocking on everybody's door, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
I'd love to hear from Dick and Carol on your thoughts on this.
I'll jump in. You know, I agree with Aaron and Rick. I as much as I hate to say it, Halloween has for years been one of my favorite nights of the year, you know, with the kids. And unfortunately this year, yeah, as Eric said, you know, we're 2 weeks away from going to 25% occupancy if the state and county decide that's what we need to do. And that's frightening for our business community, for the financial stability of, you know, the town of Breck, as well as all the businesses. So I think this is one where we need to take a tough stand, take a leadership role, and make a really, really hard decision. Because I agree with Kelly. I think it's nearly impossible to manage one-way streets and everything else with a bunch of kids and families and everything else. And as much as I would love to think that would work, you know, my common sense and experience says it just won't. So I long-winded way of saying I think we need to make a tough call here, and probably sooner as opposed to later, because our numbers stink. And I see all over town, you know, COVID fatigue and or COVID confidence, both of which are frightening. So.
Yeah, well said. Carol?
Yeah, I agree with what Dick just said. And I think we definitely need to be strong and deliberate with our message. I think as things stand now, trick-or-treating is not going to be normal. And it's us making that decision of how far we want to go. But there is so much information out there. This summer has been great, and there's a sense of normalcy, but still getting that message across that we're still in this, and we're pretty close to going to level 3, and that'll have huge economic impacts and impacts on families. So I agree. I don't know exactly what a trick-or-treating looks like. If we issue some strict guidelines for best practices, how enforceable or even easy to follow they would be, or if we make that tough decision.
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to reach out. I'll reach out to, I'll work with Kelly. I'll talk to whoever the board president is and get some input over there. Is Ian still the president? I don't know who is now.
I don't know. He's not in the office right now, so I can't ask him.
You know, one of the questions they're going to say is, well, what would the town be willing to do? And I personally don't think the town should approve a permit. I don't think we should put barricades up or do anything that would promote an organized activity, because we'll have the problems. I guarantee you, we're just promoting larger social circles that we just said we need to minimize. And so it'd be wrong to do it. So what I'd rather do is get their support and buy-in to what's the right thing to do. And they help us push and market that to the residents. And I think 90% of the people are going to understand why this is important.
Grinch that stole Halloween, but I definitely, if we put this message out and we do take that stronger stance, I would really like to put the why we're doing this, so people understand it's not just they're overreacting, but where we are and what it can do to us as a town.
Well, and as a corollary to that, Dennis, that is a message that needs to go out anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, it was easy early on because everybody was super, hyper tuned to this thing. With the fatigue that's going on, I don't know how we push this message out now, but we need to. It is important that everybody get back, on board now in the fall.
Did you see JT's comments in the Q&A?
Yeah, I saw it, but I don't know what that would look like.
BHA is doing like a story time. So, I mean, that won't be a large gathering, but that would be the one thing we kind of worry about is not having something where we bring a lot of people together. There are some options in the CDC guidance and some of the other guidance we've seen in other places about having like a virtual costume contest. Like there are ways to make Halloween fun without encouraging people to gather. I can ask about the drive-in movie. I think we're probably at the time of year where they can't really do it because of the screen and the weather conditions.
Those are the kind of ideas we need. So,
Yeah, great brainstorming.
All right. Anybody have any other things? We don't want to veer too far off.
Yep.
Well, this is COVID related. I don't know if anybody, and we don't have to talk about it now. I just want it to be on people's radar. It came up at BOSAC last night. If anybody saw Elizabeth Lawrence's Facebook post, she posted a picture of this really long line at the Troll. And I think it needs to be on our radar that there are large groups visiting the Troll. And I don't know, I think at some point we're over that number of people that can be gathered in one place. And I worry about what that could look like as far as COVID is concerned. And it could be, I mean, maybe it's just seasonal right now, and this past weekend was just really crazy, but there are other issues too, other side effects of having such a great large groups there. And we talked about kids like going by the river and issues there too. But generally that should be on our radar too. Because I don't know at one point when that's breaking the rules of COVID right now.
You know, we got some great press when we tore the troll down the first time. Maybe we could do that again.
Yeah, with the head hanging on the chain.
Great for Halloween.
Yeah, there you go. Eric,
Yeah.
anybody have anything else? Or?
Answer to that one is. Any other matters this morning? Okay, got stuff to work on. With that, we are adjourned.
All right, thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Carol, see you in a minute or two. Okay. All right, gang. Thanks.
Bye, guys.